Hello and welcome to a spooky Halloween episode of the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast. I'm Nate Goss, and I am here once again with Jenny Barry, our local history librarian, to uncover yet another one of Libertyville's eerie pieces of lore in a special creepy edition of The Past is Present. Welcome back, Jenny.
Hi, Nate. Glad to be back.
We had Jenny on last year to sort out the mystery of the gate, and it was one of our most popular episodes we've ever done on this podcast, which we definitely encourage you to dig back into. But this year's scary story hits even closer to home, right here at the Cook House. That's right, the one right in downtown Libertyville attached to the library. So, let's see if Jenny can top last year's episode with this terrifying trip down Main Street. So, Jenny, let's set the stage.
Sure.
It's the late 19th century, 1885 to be exact. According to the research you've done, what happened?
Well, I have to say, this kind of started with a clipping that we have in the Cook House from a newspaper that's unidentified. But the headline of it is fantastic. Is it a murder? A servant of the Honorable A.B. Cook found in Butler Lake, thought to have been murdered. Great excitement prevails.
So this is the headline in a newspaper.
Headline in a newspaper.
Of which we don't know the exact newspaper it was in, but it's a clipping you have.
Right, right. It's a local newspaper, but we don't know if it's a Libertyville paper or a Waukegan paper or where exactly it came from. But basically, there was a gentleman named August Rosine, and he's a native of Germany and was serving as a gardener and caretaker for Ansel B. Cook here in Libertyville, staying at the house and taking care of the house while Mr. Cook was at his Chicago home. He was found dead in Butler Lake on Wednesday, May 13th, 1885. The story goes that on the Monday night of that week, he had taken his dinner at the Fisher House, which was a hotel across the street, also known as the Grove House or Grove Hotel. And
so this would have been just a place to eat, or is this sort of like a place that he was staying at? Or?
It's kind of unclear. Most of the articles say that he was sleeping at the Cook House, but would take his meals at the Fisher House. The 1880 census actually has him at the Fisher House, so whether he was actually living there and had a room or happened to be at the hotel when the census taker came by, I can't say for sure. We know that night he was not sleeping at the Fisher House.
Okay.
So he had gone to dinner Monday night at the Fisher House, and then he also went out with some friends for that evening. And then he went back to the Cook House to retire for the evening about 9 p.m. He did not show up at the Fisher House the next morning for his breakfast. People weren't too concerned, although that was unusual, thinking maybe he went to Chicago to meet with Mr. Cook.
Now, this actually goes back to one of our last episodes we did about Cook. So Ansel B. Cook actually lived in Chicago.
Correct. At this time, his main residence was in Chicago, and the Cook House here was his summer residence or his country residence. So Mr. Fisher, the proprietor of the hotel, did go over to the Cook residence and says that he forced open a window but found no trace of Mr. Rosine. It's not clear if at that point he went in very far to look, and we'll find out why that's not clear in just a moment.
Okay.
But by Wednesday morning, there was some concern that he was not around. Mr. Rosine was not around, and a telegram was sent to Mr. Cook in Chicago asking if Mr. Rosine was with him. He said no, he was not. So another search was made of the Cook House, and this time, and here's the creepy part, blood was found on the doorknobs, the floor, and the stairway, although it's not said how much. And
so this was actually this is in the newspaper
this is
that
in
you
this
found?
Newspaper
that there was
article.
Blood found here at the Cook House.
That's what the newspaper says, yes. And apparently there was also marks of someone having been on the roof, and that an upstairs window was found open, and a bracket shelf under the window was broken with heel marks upon it, seeming to indicate that someone had stepped on it perhaps to get out the window. So that evening, E.W. Parkhurst, who was a businessman in town, took a boat out on Butler Lake because some people had pointed out there was a dark object out on the lake. It did turn out to be the body of August Rosine, and the body was towed in and taken back to the Cook residence. The coroner was telegraphed and came in a short time. I'm guessing he had to come in from Waukegan, which was the county seat. What was interesting is how much money was found related to this man. So on his body was found $120 in gold, 50 cents in silver, and $950 in bills, which in 2017 dollars is something like $23,000.
Just on his body?
On his body.
In the lake?
In the lake, yes. And then in his room, they found $79.19, which is about $2,000. Today, and also notes to the amount of $2,300 held by Chicago parties. That would be if he had loaned money to people and was holding on to kind of a promissory note. That comes out to about $56,000.
But still, it's really suspicious considering this is the gardener, right?
This is the gardener and a caretaker.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the mystery. If he's found in the lake, there's a window open upstairs. We don't know if that was in his room at the house or what. And he's got all this money on him. Right. So was it a robbery, murder?
Yeah.
He's got a lot of money on him still, so possibly not.
Yeah, because you figure if it was a robbery, why wouldn't they take the money with them?
Right. I mean, now some of the money that was on his body was actually like sewn into an inside pocket of his.
Kind of a strange character anyways, right?
It's hard to say. Now, on the May 17th, the Chicago Tribune had Ansel B. Cook himself offering a theory about the murder. Apparently, Rosine had been his employee for about 10 years, although other articles say 14 to 15 years. Mr. Cook had received a telegram from Libertyville saying that Rosine's body had been found and asking him to bring detectives with him from Chicago. So he came up to Libertyville with a detective. Turns out it was probably a Pinkerton detective, and stayed for 2 days. Now, Cook says that Rosine was a capitalist in a small way. His expenses were light and his wages were large, so it sounds like Mr. Cook must have paid him well. And at the time of his death, he possessed between $5,000 and $6,000, which today is $122,000 to about $146,000. And he was also a moneylender. So those notes that he held was something he actually had been doing for some time, I guess, lending money to other people. And most of that money was lent to people in Chicago. And Mr. Cook was kind of theorizing there were 4 Germans that he had made loans to who actually moved up to the Libertyville area and become friends with Rosine. And these were the same men that Rosine had been seen with last on that Monday night. At least 2 of them were with him. And that was the last time that he was seen alive.
Okay.
But apparently people had also seen 10 bright lights at the house that night, and it was noticed by several people because usually August Rosine would retire for the night about 8 p.m., and the house would be completely dark. So lights were on at 10 o'clock. So what's interesting to me is at the end of the inquest, it was determined that Rosine had died of strangulation before being put in the lake. So I don't know. There's no other mention about the blood or if he had any cuts or anything like that. So was there a struggle and he was strangled? The other thing that was interesting is that they found that the house and the doors and the windows were pretty much well locked from the inside. The only open window was on the second floor. So did someone drag him out the second floor window?
Right.
Or, it's not clear at all.
How this body got out of the house even after.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. This is one of those type of stories, though, that does get picked up around the country. So there were articles, for example, in the Sterling, Illinois, Fox Lake, Wisconsin, Topeka, Kansas. And again, it's kind of a game of telephone. So one article is released and then it gets picked up in different ways. So he was recently smothered in his bed by robbers and thrown in a small lake. The sum of $1,100 was found sewed up in his clothing. And then another article said the body of an elderly man. It's not clear how old he was. One article said he was 48, but according to the 1880 census, he was 26 in 1880.
Oh, that's a big difference.
So I'm not clear. I cannot find any other records of this man anywhere, so I really don't know how old he was. He was found in his house. It was thought he was murdered for money as he was a reputed miser. Again, another paper picks up that he was an elderly man. He was very steady and inclined to be miserly. Miserly sounds very derogatory to me in these instances. So that was in May. And there was no more news about the whole thing until November, when the Pinkerton detectives that were working on the case filed a complaint against a man named Stephen Bader, a German who was living about 3 miles from Libertyville. There was also a complaint filed against Berthold Metzer as an accessory to the crime.
Now, do you know if these are the same guys that were the ones that Mr. Cook was allegedly talking about?
I'm pretty sure that these are the 2 men that were seen with him that night.
Monday night.
Yeah. They were brought to a courthouse in Waukegan. Prosecution took 3 days, but they only had strong circumstantial evidence. It says the greater part of the time been taken up by testimony of medical experts and quibbling lawyers. And apparently Stephen Bader was going to be placed on the stand. I am in contact with the county courthouse, and I'm trying desperately to find out if there's any record of this case there, because I wod love to hear about the medical testimony.
Right, because you wonder, I mean, nowadays, if we see blood somewhere, it would be like, that's
DNA.
it. Yeah, do it. Yeah, seal the place off. No one, tamper. But I imagine back in the day, they probably would see blood and they'd be like, just duly noted, and then kind of try to clean the place up.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and again, if he was supposed to have been strangulated or smothered, where did the blood come from? It's hard to say. But eventually, Stephen Bader was released. There was nothing found against him. And it was interesting because in the little blurb in the Waukegan Weekly Gazette after his release, it said the sympathy of the majority of the citizens is with Mr. Bader. And people started a subscription service to raise money to help pay for his court costs.
So people thought he was framed.
Yeah, I think people thought he was a hardworking man, and apparently people didn't think that the evidence against him was strong enough.
Now, what about this guy that there was the complaint against, Berthold Metzer?
Yeah, no other information about him. He's mentioned once. Again, maybe there's something at the courthouse about his case, but I don't have it yet.
So as far as we know for this episode, it's kind of just an unsolved case, an unsolved mystery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. At the cookhouse.
Yeah, right next door.
I mean, it's just kind of wild. I feel like I've worked here for years and I've never heard this story. Is this just something that, how did you, I mean, you only found out about it because you saw this clipping, right? Well,
it's actually been a story that's been around for a while. And if you look at, even articles were written about it. It seems like every Halloween in the 80s it got pulled out before the Legend of the Gate was the annual Halloween thing, right? There's at least, I found a couple of articles in the past that, the murder of August Rosine.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a while, but I don't know that it's that well circulated.
Right. Do you know exactly what room it happened in the cookhouse?
No, I mean, we know which room was most likely a servant's room, but whether that's where he was staying or not, we don't have any idea.
Any eerie sounds or anything you've ever experienced while being in the cookhouse?
Yeah, people do ask us if the house is haunted. We have no firsthand evidence of that.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally a wardrobe door will open or something like that, but it's an old house and old furniture, and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. Does anybody, when you do your tours, does anybody ever ask you about this murder case, or does it ever get mentioned? Or do you ever mention it on the tours?
Not specifically. I mean, if somebody asks, is the house haunted, we might bring it up. It is in our docent handbook as a question.
It adds to the mystery that it just seems like this guy, this August Rosine guy, we know very little about, did he have any family, or it seems like he was kind of a loner anyways, or at least we don't have any other details to say otherwise.
We don't. I mean, I've done a little bit of research in the census. I can only find him in 1880. He was supposed to have come over several years before that. Mr. Cook said that he had come to Libertyville in 1878, which is about the time we think that the Cook House was built. So maybe he came up specifically to take care of that house. We don't know that. It's possible. I was looking through the Chicago City directories for the 1870s, like leading up to his time in Libertyville. He's not listed at all. I can't find him anywhere. So I have no more information about the man himself.
Yeah. All right, so it seems like that's about all the details we have now, but it seems like you might even be digging a little bit further, and if we do find anything, I'm hoping that you'll maybe put a blog post up about it or something, or find some way to let people know if we get any updates on this weird Libertyville mystery.
Right. If we were ever to find anything, I mean, even finding out that someone had been arrested for it is something that we found out like within the last year or so. So, we're always looking for more information, and whenever we find it, we'll definitely let you know, because if we found someone that, if there's a solution to this case, we would love to be able to share.
Yeah. So if people want to take a look at the original clipping that you had found, or the articles that talk about this, those are at the library, right?
Right. We have a copy of the clipping from the archives at the Cookhouse, and it's in our local history file in the Ansel B. Cook folder. Anything else that I found while doing more research on this will get added to that folder as well. So if anyone wanted to browse through that or learn more about Mr. Cook himself, that would be the place to go.
All right. But for now, it seems like the mystery remains unsolved.
It does.
And it's just something that we can kind of have fun getting a little creeped out about for this Halloween season. I just want to thank you, Jenny, for coming on the podcast again. It's always really nice to just have these little local history stories that we can share with people.
You're welcome. It's fun.
And I guess that just about wraps up our Halloween edition of The Past is Present. We want to wish everyone a safe and fun Halloween, but before we go, we should mention just a few things. Have you checked out Shelf Life, the library's blog? That's where a handful of librarians regularly post about what we're reading, and it's also where we post some of our best local history research, along with genealogy advice and a whole lot more. That blog can be found at shelflife.cooklib.org. If you like what you're hearing, please keep sharing it with your friends, with your family. Tell everyone you know about the podcast and let them know that they can subscribe in Apple Podcasts or really anywhere they like to get their podcasts. Speaking of Apple Podcasts, one of the best ways you can help us out is by leaving us a nice rating there. If you ever do want to get in touch with us, maybe leave some feedback or even suggest some topics for future episodes, you can always talk to us on Twitter. The library's handle is Cook Library, all one word, or you can send us an email. Just send it to webmaster@cooklib.org. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.